By day, he was just a janitor, a single dad fighting to raise his two little children. But when a powerful millionaire secretly followed him after work, she discovered a side of him the world never saw. Teaching a disabled child, working two jobs, and still finding time to love with a heart bigger than his struggles. What she uncovered would change her life and her heart forever. The skyscraper of Harrington Enterprises rose like a monument of glass and steel, shimmering beneath the city's golden evening lights, a place where ambition echoed through every polished corridor. Inside, executives in tailored suits hurried along, their voices brisk, their eyes sharp, their presence filling the air with authority and pride. Amid this river of confidence moved a man who seemed almost invisible, his steps steady, his posture calm, his mop sliding across the gleaming marble floor with quiet rhythm. Daniel Miller was his name, though few in the building bothered to ask. To them, he was simply the janitor, the man who appeared after hours when the world of decisions and deals had ended. But to those who noticed, however briefly, there was something different about him, something in the way he carried himself, as if the broom in his hand was not a symbol of servitude, but of quiet dignity. His shoes were worn, his shirt plain, yet there was a steadiness in his movements that spoke of strength born not from wealth, but from endurance. Many people never looked twice, their eyes sliding over him like he was part of the walls, yet one pair of eyes lingered longer than most. Elena Harrington, the commanding CEO of the empire that bore her family's name, had often walked past him without a word, but something about the man unsettled her ordered world. She was used to men bending toward her power, eager for approval, desperate to impress, their intentions loud and transparent. But Daniel never looked at her that way. He greeted her with the same quiet respect he gave to the receptionist, the intern, or the guard at the entrance. No more, no less. And it was in those fleeting seconds, when she caught him unaware, that she noticed it, the softness in his eyes, the gentleness that contradicted the harsh grind of his labor. It wasn't weakness, but a tenderness that hinted at a story untold. One evening, she lingered longer than usual in the hallway, her heels clicking softly against the floor, pretending to check her phone while secretly watching him. Daniel bent to wring out a mop, and in that small motion, she saw something that made her chest tighten. Weariness, yes, but also a patience that felt endless, like a man carrying invisible burdens with grace. She should have walked away, returned to her corner office, to her endless stack of contracts and emails, yet her feet refused to move. Her mind whispered questions she couldn't silence. Who is he when he leaves this building? Why does he look as if he's holding back whole oceans of feeling? For Elena, curiosity was dangerous. She thrived on control, on knowing every detail, every angle before anyone else did. And yet here was a man in her own building, unknown, unstudied, unreadable, and it unsettled her. The boardroom was her battlefield, where she never allowed doubt to touch her. But with Daniel, even in silence, she felt a strange dissonance, as though there was more power in his quiet gaze than in the signatures that moved millions of dollars across her desk. One afternoon, as she passed by with a group of executives, her voice sharp with command, her stride unwavering, she caught him glancing at a vase of flowers someone had left in the hallway. It was a fleeting glance, yet it was almost reverent, a softness that didn't belong in the cold steel of corporate life. Elena nearly stumbled, her mind snagging on that simple moment. Why would a janitor look at flowers like that, as if they held meaning? She pushed the thought aside, yet it followed her into meetings, into the late hours, when the city outside her office burned with neon lights. Every time she passed him again, she found herself slowing, though she never admitted it. There was an aura about him, something still, something that spoke without words, and she hated not knowing why. Her instincts told her that Daniel Miller was no ordinary man, though everything about him screamed simplicity. But instincts were rarely wrong. Sometimes, she caught herself staring too long, and he would look up, their eyes meeting. And in that instant, she always looked away first, a flicker of heat rising in her chest, though she didn't know if it was irritation or intrigue. It was as though Daniel carried secrets, not in a boastful way, but in the quiet folds of his character, in the unspoken strength of a man who had lived through storms yet never hardened. She began to notice details others ignored, The way he listened carefully when someone spoke to him, even if it was just an idle remark from a passing colleague. The way he offered a nod of encouragement to the security guard yawning through his late shift. The way he hummed under his breath, softly, almost like a lullaby, as he worked alone in the silence of the empty building. Each detail chipped away at the image she had of him as just another worker. Something about him demanded attention, not through force, but through presence. And Elena, against her better judgment, felt herself drawn closer, as though her soul leaned forward, trying to catch what her mind could not explain. It irritated her, this fascination. She was not a woman who indulged in mysteries. Yet Daniel Miller had become one, and the more she tried to dismiss it, the deeper the questions grew. What gave him that softness in his eyes? What weighed on his shoulders when he thought no one saw? Why did she, Elena Harrington, who had rejected countless powerful men, suddenly find her thoughts circling a janitor she barely knew? The answers would not come, and so her imagination filled the silence with possibilities, each one making her heart pound faster than the last. One night, as she stood at her office window, watching him mop the floors far below, a strange determination took hold of her. She needed to know his story, not because she was lonely, not because she was curious, but because something about him whispered that behind his quiet exterior lay a truth that could change everything. And though she didn't realize it then, that thought alone would be the beginning of a path she could not turn away from. Elena Harrington's hand lingered on the glass of her office window long after Daniel had disappeared from sight, the city's glow painting fractured reflections across her face. Her mind buzzed with unanswered questions, each one heavier than the last, until finally, one thought pressed against her with such force that she could no longer resist. That night, as the black sedan rolled out of the company garage, she gave her driver an instruction she had never spoken before. "Follow him," she said quietly, her voice steady, though her heart betrayed a restless rhythm. The driver's brow furrowed, confusion flickering for a brief second, but he obeyed, guiding the car into the stream of traffic where Daniel had already blended like a shadow. Through tinted glass, Elena watched as the janitor walked with unhurried steps, his figure swallowed by the fading light of evening. He carried no briefcase, no phone in hand, nothing that signaled importance in her world, only a simple jacket against the cooling air. The city shifted as they drove. Gleaming towers gave way to narrower streets lined with modest homes, laundry swaying on balconies, children's bicycles leaning against worn fences. Daniel turned down one such street, and before Elena could question further, the scene unfolded before her eyes. Two small figures darted out from the yard of a modest house, their laughter ringing like bells across the night. "Daddy," a boy shouted, his legs pumping fast as he hurled himself into Daniel's arms. Another voice, softer but no less eager, followed, "Papa," as a little girl clung to his leg, her cheeks glowing with joy. Elena's breath caught. Leo, 7, brimming with energy, and Nina, 5, delicate and sweet, wrapped themselves around their father as though he were the center of their universe. Daniel knelt low, his rough hands soft as they cupped their tiny faces, his smile wide and unguarded in a way Elena had never seen within the walls of Harrington Enterprises. She leaned forward in her seat, unable to look away, the image striking a chord so deep it startled her. He carried them inside, one balanced on each arm as though their weight was nothing compared to the burden he carried daily in silence. From the shadows of her car, Elena watched through curtained windows as light spilled into the small home. The house was simple, faded wallpaper, a second-hand sofa, chipped dishes, but warmth radiated from within, a warmth money couldn't buy. Daniel set the children at the table and prepared dinner. Nothing extravagant, just pasta and bread, but the joy in Leo's laughter and Nina's eager chatter made the meal feel like a feast. Elena's chest tightened as she saw him bow his head briefly before serving, his children following suit, their little voices echoing his words of gratitude. She realized she had dined with kings, with billionaires, with leaders of nations, yet she had never seen a table so full of love. After dinner, Daniel washed the dishes while Leo dried them with exaggerated seriousness, making his father chuckle. Nina sat nearby with crayons, proudly holding up her drawings, and Daniel knelt to admire every scribble as though it belonged in a gallery. The hours slipped by, Yet Elena could not tear her eyes from the window, captivated by the simple rhythms of his life. When bedtime came, she saw him carry Nina in his arms, her head resting sleepily on his shoulder, while Leo trailed behind. Pretending he wasn't tired, he tucked them into bed, smoothing Nina's blanket, kissing Leo's forehead, and whispering something she couldn't hear but could almost feel, the weight of love in his words. For a moment, the house fell quiet, and Elena thought Daniel would finally rest. But instead, he slipped out into the night again, his steps purposeful, his expression weary yet unwavering. Curiosity gripped her tighter, and she gestured for the driver to keep going. They followed him down another street, where the homes grew even smaller, until he stopped at one with dim lights and a single window glowing faintly. Inside, a boy in a wheelchair sat waiting, his eyes fixed on the door with a mix of hope and impatience. The instant Daniel appeared, those eyes lit up, brighter than the lamps in the room. Elena's throat constricted at the sight, realizing this child had been waiting just for him. Daniel entered, greeting the boy with a warm embrace, kneeling so their eyes met, his smile unshaken by the day's exhaustion. He pulled out a worn book, settling beside the boy, and began guiding his hand over the pages. Patiently, he encouraged him to sound out words, celebrating every small victory with genuine pride. The boy laughed when he stumbled, and Daniel laughed with him, the sound rich, unforced, alive. From the car, Elena whispered to herself, almost afraid of the truth forming in her chest. He's tired, yet he gives more. Who lives like this? Her eyes stung, though she couldn't explain why. Her heart caught between awe and something dangerously close to longing. She leaned back into her seat, the leather cool against her trembling hands, realizing she had stumbled upon a hidden path, one that revealed not just who Daniel was, but a world of love she had never known. And though she told herself she should turn away, that this was too far, she couldn't. The sight of him, the sound of that laughter, the tenderness with which he guided the boy, each moment pulled her deeper into a story she didn't yet understand. Somewhere inside, Elena Harrington knew she had crossed a threshold, and with every passing second, she sensed that following Daniel Miller would uncover truths that would not only unsettle her world of power, but perhaps change it forever. Night fell heavy over the city, but Elena found herself drawn back again, the tinted glass of her sedan once more becoming a shield between her world and Daniel's. What had begun as curiosity was now something more dangerous, something she could not name without trembling. She told herself she only wanted to understand him, yet her heart betrayed her, thundering each time his figure appeared. Daniel moved with the same quiet determination she had seen before, his life a relentless rhythm of sacrifice. By day, he scrubbed floors that gleamed for people who never noticed, and by evening, he slipped into kitchens where the clang of dishes and hiss of steam drowned out his weariness. He did it without complaint, without bitterness, as though hardship were a garment he had long ago accepted as his own. And yet, no matter how heavy the hours, Elena watched him carve out pieces of himself to give to others. When his shift ended, he didn't collapse into rest. Instead, he returned home where two children, half asleep but waiting, lit up at the sight of him. Leo would run first, his boyish energy never dimmed, begging his father to play one more game, to tell one more story. Daniel always obliged, his rough hands becoming puppets, his deep voice weaving worlds that made his children giggle until their eyes drooped shut. Nina, gentler but no less fierce in her love, would climb into his lap, her tiny hands tangled in his shirt as though afraid he might slip away. Elena's chest tightened as she watched him braid Nina's hair with clumsy fingers, his tongue caught between his teeth in concentration. The braid wasn't neat, not polished, but Nina's proud smile made it perfect. She watched as Daniel tied Leo's shoelaces slowly, showing him the loops again and again with patience most fathers would not spare. These were small acts, ordinary to some, yet to Elena they looked like treasures, proof of a love that gave without measure. Each night revealed more. She saw how he saved the last bite of food for his children, how he mended Leo's torn backpack with thread barely holding, how he wrapped Nina in his jacket when the air turned cold, caring little that his own skin shivered beneath the night wind. Elena, who had built her life upon steel and glass, who commanded boardrooms with fire in her voice, felt her strength falter in the face of such gentleness. And then there was the boy in the wheelchair, whose waiting eyes grew brighter each time Daniel appeared. Elena had seen teachers, tutors, even therapists with endless resources, but none carried the devotion Daniel did. He leaned in close, his voice steady and encouraging, celebrating each word stumbled through as though it were a triumph. He turned learning into laughter, struggle into hope. Watching him, Elena whispered to herself in disbelief. He gives everything and asks for nothing. Her heart, once armored against sentiment, now ached in ways she could not suppress. She thought of the men she had known, powerful men with polished shoes and expensive smiles, men who showered her with gifts that glittered but carried no warmth. Not one had looked at her, or at anyone, with the tenderness Daniel gave so freely to a child not even his own. Late one night, as the clock neared midnight, Elena caught herself gripping the car door handle, an impulse burning within her to step out, to cross the line she had drawn between watching and knowing. But fear held her back, fear of shattering the fragile magic of these moments, fear of him turning and seeing her not as a woman, but as an intruder. Yet the more she watched, the more she realized she was no longer fascinated. Fascination was fleeting, like curiosity. That burned out once questions were answered. What she felt now was deeper, more dangerous. It was longing. Longing for a life not gilded by wealth, but softened by love. Longing for hands that gave without keeping count. Longing for the quiet strength of a man who carried burdens yet smiled as if he carried none. The cliff edge grew sharper each night. She told herself she should stop, that her world and his could never meet without breaking something fragile. But her heart betrayed her, tugging her back again and again, until she finally whispered to herself words she had never thought she'd say. I am falling, not into curiosity, not into fascination, but into love, quiet, patient, true. A love that terrified her because it was unlike anything she had known, and yet, a love that promised to change everything if she dared to reach for it. And in the shadows of her silence, Elena Harrington realized she stood on the edge of a choice that would alter not only her future, but Daniel's, and perhaps even her very soul. Under the cover of twilight, Elena Harrington felt the weight of her own heart pressing harder with each step she took. For nights, she had stood in the shadows, content to watch Daniel's world unfold like a story she wasn't meant to read. But the longer she waited, the harder it became to keep her distance. She could no longer be only an observer of his life. Her silence had grown too heavy, her longing too sharp. That evening, she found herself moving toward the park where she knew he often stopped, her heels softer now against the worn pavement, her breathing unsteady though she was a woman accustomed to commanding rooms full of men twice her age. There he was, seated on a weathered bench, the boy in the wheelchair beside him, his small fingers clumsily tracing the pages of a book while Daniel guided him with gentle patience. Elena stood for a moment unseen, her chest tightening at the sight, at the warmth of Daniel's voice, at the quiet glow of the crunch of gravel beneath her shoes made Daniel turn, and the look on his face was one she would never forget. Surprise first, sharp and unguarded, followed by something else. Hesitation, perhaps even worry, as though her presence did not belong in this small, fragile corner of his world. Miss Harrington, he asked, rising slightly, wiping his hands nervously on the front of his faded shirt. The name sounded wrong to her now, too formal, too distant. She forced a smile, though her heart raced like a bird desperate to take flight. Elena, please, she said softly, her voice almost trembling, but her eyes steady and clear. Here, I'm just Elena. Daniel blinked, as though unsure what to make of her words, and for a long heartbeat, silence stretched between them. The boy in the wheelchair looked from one adult to the other, sensing something he couldn't quite name. Elena swallowed the tightness in her throat and took another step closer. I've seen what you do, she confessed, her words falling heavy into the evening air. For your children, for this boy, for everyone around you. The weight of the truth pressed against her chest, threatening to spill more than she had intended, but she steadied herself. You give so much, Daniel, she continued, her voice low but unwavering now. And you ask for nothing. Do you know how rare that is? Daniel shifted his gaze downward, his jaw tightening, as if her praise embarrassed him more than it flattered. "I'm just doing what's right," he murmured, his tone humble, almost apologetic. His hand brushed against the book as though grounding himself in the moment. "My kids, they're my world. And if I can help someone else, even a little, then maybe they'll grow up believing kindness matters." Those words struck her deeper than any declaration of love ever had. In her life, she had been surrounded by men who worshipped her power, who bought her diamonds, who showered her with flattery laced with self-interest. Yet here was Daniel Miller, standing before her in worn shoes and a faded shirt, speaking with the conviction of a man who needed nothing but to give love freely. Her throat tightened, her eyes stinging as if tears threatened to break past the barriers she had spent a lifetime building. She had always prided herself on being untouchable, on walking through the world with armor of elegance and authority. But standing in front of him, she felt stripped of all titles, all wealth, all walls. For the first time in her life, she felt like the student, and he, unknowingly, was the teacher. He was teaching her the meaning of richness that no bank account could hold, no contract could buy. The boy laughed suddenly, pulling Daniel's hand toward the page, breaking the intensity for a brief moment. Elena smiled faintly at the sound, though her heart remained heavy, trembling with words unspoken. Daniel looked back at her, still cautious, still unsure why she was there. And in that look was a quiet cliffhanger she could not escape. Did he see her as just an intruder in his simple life, or could he one day accept her into it? And though she tried to steady her breathing, Elena Harrington knew this was only the beginning of something she could no longer hide. 5. The air between them that night in the park carried a weight neither of them could name, a fragile thread woven out of sincerity and silence. Elena left with her heart trembling, her thoughts tangled in ways she could not control. But something had shifted, and she knew it could not be undone. From that moment, her steps carried her not back into the lonely corridors of her mansion, but toward the modest streets where Daniel's life unfolded with quiet grace. She returned again and again, not as the commanding CEO of Harrington Enterprises, but as Elena, a woman who had discovered she wanted more than the hollow victories of power. At first, her presence startled Daniel. He was wary, cautious, his instinct telling him that their worlds were not meant to collide. But little by little, his guard softened. Each evening she appeared, Leo and Nina greeted her with squeals of delight, tugging her hands, showing her their newest treasures, a drawing, a toy, a story only a child could tell with such wonder. Elena found herself kneeling on worn rugs, playing games she had never known, laughing freely at their innocent mischief. For the first time in years, she felt alive in a way no boardroom had ever made her feel. Daniel watched her quietly in those early days, his gaze cautious, his heart protective. He had seen many people come and go, people who looked down on his life, his struggles. Yet Elena did not look down. She knelt down. She tied Nina's shoelaces, let Leo braid her hair with clumsy fingers, and clapped with genuine joy when the boy in the wheelchair sounded out a new word under Daniel's patient guidance. She sat beside them, not above them, and slowly the line between her world and his blurred. The more time she spent in that small home, the more Elena's own mansion felt like a gilded cage. Here, in Daniel's world, there were no crystal chandeliers or polished marble floors, but there was something her wealth had never bought: warmth, laughter, belonging. She began to crave it, to crave them, in a way that startled her. Daniel noticed, and though he hesitated, though fear lingered in his tired eyes, he could not deny the sincerity he saw in her every gesture. One evening, as dusk fell and the fireflies began to dance across the yard, Elena stood with Daniel on the porch while Leo and Nina chased the glowing sparks of light. Their laughter filled the air like music, innocent and wild. The boy in the wheelchair clapped from the sidelines, cheering them on, his smile wide. Elena leaned closer, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You've given me a gift I didn't know I needed," she confessed, her eyes shimmering. "You've shown me what love truly is." Daniel turned to her, his expression soft, his strength no longer hidden but shining through his weariness. The glow of the night caught the edges of his face, making him seem almost luminous in the dark. "Love isn't in what we have, Elena," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of truth. It's in who we hold. Her breath caught, and for a moment she couldn't speak. She reached for his hand, tentative, uncertain, yet full of longing. His hand met hers, calloused and warm, and the simple touch sent a shiver through her. In that moment, she realized the truth she had been searching for her entire life. The wealth she had chased, the empire she had built, the power she had guarded. None of it mattered compared to this man's quiet heart, compared to the two children who looked at him as their entire world, compared to the way she felt when she was near them. As they stood side by side, their hands entwined, Elena felt something settle deep inside her, a peace she had never known, a certainty that she had finally found her place. The night around them seemed to hold its breath, the laughter of the children echoing like a promise of all that was to come. And when Daniel looked at her, truly looked at her, she knew she was no longer the CEO, staring down at the janitor. She was a woman in love, standing with a man who had been rich all along, not in gold, but in heart. The world beyond that yard would keep spinning, deals would still be struck, fortunes would still rise and fall. But for Elena Harrington, life had found its meaning in the simplest of places, in the warmth of a modest home, in the laughter of two children, in the love of a man who gave everything without asking for anything. And so, under the soft glow of fireflies and the music of innocent laughter, Elena and Daniel stepped into a future neither had expected, but both had longed for. Not a future built on power or wealth, but on love, quiet, patient, unshakable. It was in that moment, when her hand remained in his, that Elena realized she had finally found the wealth she had been searching for all her life. It lived not in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in a single dad's heart that had been rich all along. In the end, Elena didn't fall in love with his status. She fell in love with his soul, his sacrifice, and his love for Leo and Nina. True wealth isn't measured in money, but in the love we give and receive. Sparkling Heart, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Heartwoven Tales for more unforgettable stories. And tell us in the comments, what does true love mean to you?